Hey, good morning. Got a little problem here with the audio. All right. Well, I stopped. This is a bummer. Okay, I think I got it worked out here. Doing something new, so always a few learning opportunities. So we're going to fade out the rain sounds a little bit, alright? Here, there we go. All right, so I'm not sure what's going on there with all the little stutter stop, but good morning. It's Saturday morning. It's almost 6:15 a.m., March 14th, 2020. And I've got some good stuff this morning, I think, that might be helpful, insightful, and applicable to the times we're living in and the times of your life, the end times of your life and of the age of the world. Oh, too heavy, too much. Oh, hey man, today might be your last day. Tomorrow might be my last day. This might be my last broadcast. I don't know. Thank the Lord for the day, for our breath, for our life, for our breakfast we had this morning, sleep we had last night. Everything He supplies according to your need. So, all right, I want to do this in a couple parts, okay? First of all, the reason we've got the rainforest and the rain coming down is just something to look at while I talk, rather than just a news site or something like that. In this recent turn of events of this unfolding of it's more than a pandemic. It's it could be a trial balloon of some sorts. No doubt it is. I mean, they research, who's they? The powers that shouldn't be. They study how to deceive. They practice how to deceive. Oh, what tangled webs they weave, those who practice to deceive. They do so. And I want to share some information. There's a investigative journalist named John Rappaport that I want to read. It may sound a bit lengthy, but it's very applicable to what's going on right now. But I need to preface it with something from the Bible, because otherwise it's just too incredible. Even those who might be understanding there's something going on beyond the surface. There's something they're not telling us. There's something going on that we don't see. There's machinations. I'm avoiding the word conspiracy because that word's been trashed. But that's what it is. And even for those who traffic in those kind of ideas, they still tend to hedge. You have one foot in the world that doesn't believe, that wants to get along with everybody, that wants to go with the flow, be normal. And then the other foot in this fringe world of things are crazier than they appear. Well, my question for you is, do you really love the truth? Do you want to live in reality? Or do you want to just go along with your head in the sky, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? And I use that reference surgically. If you think it through, it means a lot of things, but all involving a hallucination, a fantasy, a double fantasy, a delusion, a strong delusion. Okay, so this is going to be in 3 parts. First of all, this is the continuation of what's being a daily meditation upon Psalm 91 in this age of the noisome pestilence and people dying to our left and to our right, the fear of death, the bondage to the fear of death, all around you. All around you. It's what you're witnessing. Those who live in bondage to the fear of death. So 3 parts. The first one is I want to discuss how these things can be, because many people, the majority of people can't even, they'd have turned me off already. They'd have turned off, they've hidden all their friends who might post memes or reference things of this nature. They never seek things out themselves. They don't watch documentaries for what they're worth. Not every just because something's a documentary doesn't mean it's the truth. But you can learn a lot of things. And if you have a heart for truth, if you desire to know, it'll be shown to you. Over time even. So I want to explain, and again the premise being, I'm all about premises here. The premise is that the Word of God is true. That's another topic. If you're not in that place, this isn't the place for you, other than, I mean, you're welcome to be here, but it's going to be useless. You've already neutralized the medicine in your own mind. You've resisted its application. I'm not quite as awake as I thought I was. I've been up since about 4 a.m. and when I have a flood of thoughts and things I want to say, I don't, this is all from the hip. I'm not writing this out and editing it and making a presentation. I'm just creating a venue and speaking as if we're sitting in a coffee shop having a conversation. So I want to talk about the temptation of Jesus, not his real name, and I'll say that just once because I like to say it. It's important to say it. I'm just going to say it once. The temptation of Jesus, and then I'm going to read this somewhat lengthy thing by John Rappaport. Now, stick with the whole thing, okay? And then I'm going to basically edify myself and hopefully you with Psalm 91. We got to go out in the world today. I'm going to be going to the gym, and yesterday I went down there very early in the morning. First day in 3 months since I've been going to this particular place. The first day that I got in a front row parking, even this early in the morning. I went in and I scanned my little, they keep track of when you go in and out. And I said, what's going on? The first time I knew the answer, right? I knew the answer. The guy turned to me and he barely contained his smile. Young guy. Younger than what I even term millennials. He's probably 23, 24. And he said, coronavirus. Now, you got to remember, the millennial age group, the younger people in their 20s, they've already been informed that this isn't going to affect them, really. They might get some very mild symptoms. They're not going to die. Let's put it that way. And I've lived through, I'm obviously older than millennials, okay? I've lived through MRSA, SARS, swine flu, bird flu, Ebola, I don't know. There's a H1N1. There's a list of them, and maybe that's redundant to say. I think that might even be swine flu. There's every couple years, it seems, there's an epidemic virus that is killing people somewhere in parts of the world, and lo and behold, before you know it, it's going to be in your kitchen, in your workplace. I've lived through all that, and I know what it's like to be sort of like, here we go again, or just, it doesn't really, they're not thinking about it. He kind of hit a grimace, because he knows he's supposed to take it seriously. Why? Because there is a different tone to this one than there has been for any of the other ones. And the other ones, they're statistically, so far, at least in hindsight, much, much worse than what this situation is, even if it's real whatsoever. And that is in question, and you'll see that once I read this little blog. But let me get into it, okay? The temptation of Jesus. So if you're not familiar with the story, before Jesus started his ministry in Galilee, he was led by the Spirit of the wilderness. And I'm just going to read this. There's two places. It's in Matthew and it's in Luke, and I want to read the one in Luke for a particular reason. It has a few extra things it says that are apropos and very much what the point of reading it is, okay? Its context is everything, okay? And Jesus I'm going to read this, starting verse 1. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. Now, here you go. You've got to believe. Is there a devil? There are people who believe in God, believe in one God, believe there's a Messiah that's coming, but they don't believe in the devil. Well, that's not what history and the Bible say, okay? I mean, we can make up our own theology, but I know that I want to be in the right theology. What's reality? Did we go to the moon or didn't we go to the moon? Is the earth flat or is the earth round? These things do matter. How much they matter just depends on situations. But is Christ the Messiah, or is he just a prophet? These are important questions. What are you doing here on earth? Having a good time? Being thought well of others? Making a lot of money? Soaking up experiences and sights and sounds and travels? Racking up concert ticket stubs? Eating the finest foods, all right. Going to the finest schools, all right. In the end, what really matters? You came out of nothing from your mother's womb. And are you going to know God or not? He's calling to you to know him. What's the nature of reality? It's a fallen world. We know there's evil in the world, And then when you discover there's evil in you, when there's lawlessness in you, you say, aha, I am a sinner, a wretched man that I am. And you need a savior, right? Okay, moving on. Point is, there's a devil, okay? So this is not a fairy tale. It bothers me that I feel compelled to condescend to what seems to me the lowest common denominator, that somebody's watching this and doesn't know this stuff, or is super doubtful. However, maybe that's what this is about. Maybe please forgive me. I get tired of little thoughts hanging me up from just reading the damn thing. Okay, excuse me, that's not what I say, but just reading it. All right. And the devil taking him up. Okay, hang on a minute. And the devil said to him. All right, backing up again. All right. So Jesus, full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. And in those days he did eat nothing. And when they were ended, he afterward hungered. And the devil said to him, "If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread." So he tempted him in the flesh. He was hungry. Hadn't eaten for 40 days. Have you ever been that desperate and that in need of something and then tempted to have it immediately and then denied yourself? That's power. And Jesus answered him, saying, "It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God." And the devil, taking him up unto a high mountain, showed him to him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. Now, this means that he showed him the future. He showed him all the kingdoms of the world. The British Empire, that was a kingdom of the world. This American Empire, which in a lot of ways is a continuation of previous empires, of the cabal that's been, the powers that shouldn't be that have been for millennia. But they take different shapes, but it's the same forces. He showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him, "All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them. For that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine." Now Jesus, being the Son of God, he answered and said to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." So there's a little bit more of that. He tempted him again, and then he left him. But here's the important part to consider. And this is going into this whole deal with this pandemic, the powers that shouldn't be, and what I'm about to read you. The devil said to him, "All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me." So he is saying, all the kingdoms of the world, that time in the present then, so our past then, and going forward to now, and even forward to the end of time, as we know it. The devil said all this power is delivered, and the glory of these kingdoms, they're delivered to him, and to whomsoever he will give it. If you will worship me, all shall be yours. So it was more important to Satan to be worshipped by the true God than it was to have any of these things. They were worthless to him compared to that. And of course, the Lord was not, he didn't challenge him and say, "They're not yours to give." Right? He didn't say, they're not delivered to you, and to whomsoever you will give it. I'm the Creator. I'm the Lord God of all. I'm even your God. He didn't say anything of the sort. He didn't deny that truth or that lie. In a sense, it's a lie because he is limited. He is not omnipotent. He is not omniscient, meaning Satan. But he is the prince and the power of the air. Satan has power in this world. And he will give the glory of these kingdoms, he will give the power of these kingdoms to whoever he will, if they will worship him. Are you smelling what I'm cooking here? Now, the Lord, the living God, the Lord God, the Creator, of course, he is in control, and he limits powers, and he sets up kings and deposes kings. He has this power. But Satan is working in mankind to turn all from Christ, to deny Christ, to destroy the gospel, destroy the good news of salvation, until the fullness of times. And he has the power to give all the kingdoms of the world, all the power to whoever will worship him. So when you see these conspiratorial videos of these people doing the one eye symbol and Illuminati stuff and flashing symbols and signs, gangs do this. They use symbols and signs and colors It's all around us. They're no different. These quote unquote elites. They may be elite in Satan's kingdom. Be grateful that you're average Joe. Be grateful that you're not drawn up into or seeking from your own soul great fame, wealth, and glory for yourself, and compromising, because where are you going to get that from? Is a lost man or woman being served? Is God being true to himself if he bestows upon them all kinds of reasons that mankind worships them and follows them and gives them adulation and honor and praise and fawns over them, basically creating a mass of sycophants who don't even know them, making them a distraction? Think about the Amish women and even the men. They dress very plain. Why? So as not to draw attention to themselves. That's sort of the supposed premise of why they dress so plain, don't wear makeup and things like that. It's sort of an act of humility. But in our world, probably yours, mine, right? The world that we are indoctrinated into through the cult of the government schools, the indoctrination. We're exposed to the culture, the cult, left and right. If you go to public schools, you're going to be exposed to the cult. You're going to be expected to be up with the times, what's on TV, what the fashions are, what the music is, who the celebrities are. Am I wrong? Okay. So you and I, who aren't going to a one-room schoolhouse or being homeschooled, now I'm way past that, thankfully. Finally got spit out of those institutions just by matriculation. The fact is that God isn't being true to himself to give men and women, making them basically gods on the earth. Celebrities in the United States are demigods, pretty much. And they're not like you and I, right? They have different sets of laws for many of them. They're treated very differently. The words they say are considered in a different light than yours or mine. My point being is that Satan has the power to, when you see someone, not everyone, for the Lord has people placed throughout the king's palace, okay? Let's put it that way. He has his people. He has his Joseph, who's in Pharaoh's house, and Joseph was lifted up, but delivered his people. So my point being is that when we listen to these talking heads and powers that shouldn't be, these people who seem so important, where do they get their power, and who are they serving? Who are they working for? More than who they're working for, who do they worship? I know many of you think Trump is this Christian who's upending the deep state, and he's draining the swamp, and he's just being thwarted and frustrated every which way. Well, I could show you 6 ways from Sunday how he's doing the exact opposite of what you think he's doing. Hey, I would love to be wrong. So many of you think he's God's man for the hour. Well, looks like God chose a bad dude. God made a bad choice then, didn't he? Then God isn't able to give him the power to defeat these people who are just giving him such a hard time. I don't know. I think there's a lot of wannabeism going on. You want it to be so. And I respect you for it. At least you have a desire for something good. But on one hand, on the other hand, it's snap out of it, All right, moving on. So my point being is that I'm going to read you something. And the whole reason I told you about this and brought this out about the temptation of Jesus, and showing that Satan has the power to give the powers, to give the kingdoms of the earth, to make you a leader, make you a ruler, to make you high up in these kingdoms of the earth for those who will worship him. Now, who are they worshiping? The one who defies the Most High God, and he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Remember the BTK killer? What was it? Something torture and kill. I don't remember what the B stands for. But just like the BTK killer, Satan comes for these three things. His fruits are this: kill, steal, and destroy. He's a murderer, he's a liar, he's a thief, and he's a destroyer, a bad one. Okay, so almost want to hear some rain songs again, or rain sounds. See if we can get a little going here. All right, well, that's actually, I'm going to turn it off again. Doesn't come out very good. All right, so I'm going to move on now. I'm going to read this article from John Rappaport. And I'm going to have to probably here, I'm going to leave up the I'm going to leave up the tropical view for you, and I'm going to read to you an article. I'll show it to you here. How to stage a fake epidemic and brainwash billions of people. Who is John Rappaport? Some of you won't listen to a damn thing anybody says unless somebody's got worldly credentials, right? Well, he's worked as a freelance investigative reporter for 30 years, written articles on politics, health, media, culture, art for LA Weekly, blah, blah, blah. And, this is not that important to me. I don't care if a donkey speaks the truth or a rock cries out the truth. Or, the homeless guy in the street who seems off and in another dimension. I have the ability to recognize when truth is being spoken to me. So he was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize at one point. He's hosted written radio programs, blah, blah, blah. Okay? There you go. Poetry published in Massachusetts Review, graduate of, went to college, has a wife, made his consulting practice. He's a lot more productive than I probably ever will be in my life. All right? How about that? So let's go back. February 26th. This is current, fairly current. All right, he's quoting himself here from something he wrote called The Underground. He says, when gigantic megacorporations steal land, here, don't be reading this. Just meditate on the beautiful creation, all right? When gigantic megacorporations steal land from third world people and then poison these people with their horrific pollution, why isn't it called murder? Do you remember the thing in India? Well, wait a minute. Maybe it's South America. Somewhere Coca-Cola contaminated a lot of people's water, caused all kinds of problems. And then another chemical company, I can't remember the name. I won't say one just to make one up. I can think of chemical company names. I just remember, in my time, I remember seeing just horrific things they've done disposing of their waste from these plants that just destroyed people's lives. And not just killed them. Birth defects, you name it. All right. Why isn't it called murder? Is that too stark? Does it offend delicate sensibilities? Would you say that a drug gang who shoots up a bar and kills 10 innocent bystanders is just carrying out, quote, typical business practices in their field of endeavor, and should therefore never be prosecuted in a court of law on a charge of homicide? Because I'm ad-libbing this, because that's the same thing, right? So that's his quote from himself. This article assembles facts contained in my ongoing series on the, quote, China epidemic, To get the details, I recommend going back and reading all those articles. Well, the reason I'm reading this to you is I posted this on social media. Most people don't read. Most people don't want to take the time. We're fascinated by video. It's easier to watch video. And I fall into that too. I try to make myself read, but I also know that I can't say, here, read this, and expect people are going to read it. Maybe 1 out of 100 will. If a group wants to stage a fake and frightening epidemic, how would they do it? First of all, what reasons would they have to launch such an audacious plan? All right, here we go now. On one level, they want to cover up human harm that is already occurring. Now remember the context. This is specifically talking about this whole pandemic, whatever, started in China, right? Supposedly. They want to explain this harm with a false story. For example, suppose a combination of deadly corporate air and water and 5G electronic pollution is making people sick and killing them. The parties responsible are surely not going to admit their crimes. Nope. Instead, they're going to claim a new virus is causing this harm in the form of, say, lung disease. The virus just, quote-unquote, emerged. It showed up out of nowhere. It crossed species from animals to humans. We hear that with almost all of these things, right? AIDS came from monkeys. No, it came from a lab. They might have used monkeys to develop it, but didn't come from some guy in Nigeria committing bestiality with a monkey. That's not how it happened. That was the story back in my day when that first came on the scene. All right, moving on. So the first thing needed is a cluster of cases in one locale. A small group of people who have the same symptoms. Wuhan, China. Sound familiar, right? This is easy to find. How about ordinary flu symptoms? Fever, fatigue, weakness with an emphasis on lung complication from the forms of pollution. Excuse me. We should know, the air in China, you can't even see very far in some places. The smog is so bad. A few of these people are very ill. 2 of them die. Now the publicity news machine swings into gear. Okay, remember, they find the locale and then they make a story out of this. It's called an outbreak. It isn't, but that's the story. They were all, quote, exposed to something, unquote, at, say, a riverfront dock restaurant. I don't know where he got that. There may be more to the Wuhan story that I don't know about, but let me move on. Pardon me, my nose is kind of, I've got a stuffy nose, I guess you'd say. The news shoveled directly into mainstream outlets comes from elite public health agencies like the CDC and the World Health Organization. It's an outbreak. To use a technical term, this is all bullshit. Understand? Yeah, it's a bad word. You know, I had my mouth washed out with soap, and probably I'm too old for people to do that now. I try not to use bad words, but in some instances, like here, it makes the point. People in the locale of the new case cluster are falling ill and dying as a result of the actual pollution causes listed above. But the news takes a different slant. Quote, researchers from WHO and CDC state that a, quote, mystery illness has emerged in city X, think Wuhan, and they are working to discover the virus, unquote. New paragraph. Who said it was a virus? Who made that unwarranted assumption? World Health Organization and the CDC. They always say it's a virus. It's true. It's true. At this point, suddenly, it's news all over the planet, and most of the population is roped in right from the get-go. Virus. Yes, I see. Which virus? Now, aren't you seeing this? Real time? Most of the population is roped in. They're in bondage to the fear of death, and the powers that shouldn't be know this. What you do is make people afraid. New paragraph. And shortly and miraculously, the answer comes. It's VX-20. Virus 20, I guess is he's trying to say. What he's saying basically is COVID-19, right? In this hypothetical. But anyway, a new virus never seen before, which probably emerged from fish and crossed over into humans. One fisherman has already died. Voila, we have a new disease, VX-20. Next question. Did researchers actually find this virus? Did they? Follow the next piece closely. There's a sleight of hand involved. One scenario. Researchers used what are called indirect markers to infer that a virus was there. Now, you've heard about DNA markers, right? Things like that. They used indirect markers to infer that a new virus was there in samples of tissue taken from several people in the original cluster of riverfront victims in our hypothetical here. The researchers didn't actually use basic procedures to purify the tissue sample from even one patient, and they didn't see many identical viruses in an electron microscope photograph of the purified sample, if they took such a photograph at all. They certainly didn't perform this complete test on several hundred emerging patients. They should have, but they didn't. And most certainly, other researchers, including independent analysts, didn't perform the necessary electron microscope test on hundreds of so-called, quote-unquote, epidemic patients. So, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and WHO, World Health Organization, the CDC and WHO researchers came up with a notion, an idea, an inference about a virus through these indirect markers. And via a process of continuing inferences, they characterized the virus they never saw. Scenario 2. Let's be generous and assume the researchers did bother to look in electron microscope photographs, derived only from a few patients, not hundreds of patients as they should have. What did they actually see in the photos? Maybe they saw a few particles that looked similar to each other, but quite possibly these virus-like particles were just passengers that ordinarily live in the body and cause no harm. However, the researchers jump up and down and say, this is it. This is the new killing virus, and we will now assemble its genetic sequence. And they do. So what? These researchers don't bother to make the distinction between viruses that might do harm and those that do nothing. Why? Because they're determined to find something, anything. That's their basic mission. Now back to what I was saying about Satan will give, for those who will worship him, he'll give this, that, and the other thing. Well, think about it. Who wants to be the first to discover what's killing people? Who wants to be the scientist to identify something? They're clamoring to be the one. So there's those motivations. There's multitudes of motivations, not to mention payola and corruption and skewing data to get desired results. You know, this may be too high for you. The powers that shouldn't be have networks, and it isn't just in certain countries. It's worldwide. In both scenarios, moving on in the article, in both scenarios, they've fallen woefully short of proving that a new virus is responsible for making people ill. But never mind. News outlets and governments are already on the march. This is it. A new epidemic. VX-20. A whole city is already locked down. Think Wuhan, right? Think COVID-19. Screeners are waving wands at passengers getting off planes. Some U.S. talking head is saying there's now a rush to develop a vaccine. New cases of VX-20 are showing up in other cities and other countries. Boom. Does this sound familiar? This was written 3 weeks ago. Let's examine that last part about new cases and quote-unquote spreading, because this is where people really fall for the con. They say, quote, well, here is a city where there is no air or water or 5G pollution, and they're discovering new cases. So how do you explain that? Unquote. New paragraph. The new cases and the spread are based entirely on diagnostic tests. Those test results determine there is a quote-unquote epidemic case or a quote-unquote spread. There are two main tests, antibody and PCR. I don't know what PCR stands for. I've heard of it. I've forgotten. In a nutshell, neither test is adequate to say, here is a new case. Both tests are unreliable and worthless. It's more of the con. Both tests will claim to show quote-unquote new cases when they don't. They might show some antibodies or a few tiny fragments of what might possibly be a virus, but they show nothing that directly points to human illness. Have you heard of people being quarantined? They're not sick. What about Macron, whatever his name is, the Canadian guy? His wife had some symptoms. He's tested positive, I think. Whatever. They self-quarantine. No, they're not ill, though. How about that? Relying on those tests would be on the order of laying down a bet on a game that isn't even scheduled. It's a farce. Antibody tests, which purport to prove illness coming from a virus, are actually showing, at best, that the patient came in contact with a virus. Okay, this will be explained a little more. So basically, the antibody tests show that somebody came in contact with a virus. That's it. Actually, before 1984, this was generally taken to mean that the patient was in good shape. His immune system had defeated the germ. But then, for several no good reasons, the science was turned on its head. All of a sudden, a positive antibody test was taken to mean the patient was ill or would soon become ill. Nonsense. Farce. Now you can go research this if you have any doubts and see if this is true. Okay. The PCR test takes a tiny sample from a patient that might contain a virus, but the virus particle is far too small to comprehend. The PCR blows up that particle many times so it can be analyzed. But the test says nothing about how much virus, if any, is replicating in the patient's body. And you need millions and millions of a virus replicating in the body to even begin talking about a cause of actual illness. New paragraph. And both tests rely on the unwarranted assumption that a virus actually causing illness, VX20, was truly discovered in the first place. New paragraph. Armed with these pathetic tests, public officials begin reporting a new epidemic case here and a new one there, and pretty soon, 40 countries have new cases, and the public falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. And that's how you stage a fake epidemic. The rest is pure publicity and lockdown and theater. Dangerous theater. Toxic drugs and toxic vaccines will be brought on board to treat the epidemic that was never there. The actual ongoing causes of illness and dying will remain in place, shoved deep into the background. And this amounts to a capital crime, as in murder. Remember that. People will be told not to question the official line on the quote-unquote epidemic. This is called a clue. Why not ask questions? Now think about this, because I read this yesterday and I'm like, I kind of, maybe I was tired, but what they're saying is, if you're not allowed to question something, that ought to tell you something. It's that simple. Why not ask questions? Because the answers might lead to a correct conclusion about the enormous con job. Let me add a few comments. The World Health Organization itself states that every year there are millions of cases of ordinary flu around the world and several 100,000 deaths. Think about that, several 100,000 deaths. This isn't coronavirus, but the flu sufferers can easily be called new epidemic cases. Now think about that, okay? This is really important. People dying around the world, there's different seasons at different, like it's summer in one place, it's winter in another, okay? Flu sufferers can easily be called new epidemic cases. Ordinary flu can be statistically, quote-unquote, imported and called coronavirus. So they're borrowing these statistics, these numbers from what normal flu, and they're lumping it into, labeling it as they're victims of this new virus. All right, new paragraph. I'm ad-libbing some of this here to help break it down a little bit. Then there is the medical treatment imposed on people who are told they are coronavirus cases. I'm talking about highly toxic antiviral drugs which have the ability to stop natural reproduction of cells in the body, particularly when such people already have weakened immune systems or organ function problems. The results can be catastrophic. The patients can die. Of course, if they do, they will be called, quote, deaths from the epidemic, unquote. Yeah, so you hear these numbers, you can't even believe them, right? All right, new paragraph. Finally, there was something else you may have heard of. I mentioned it a few paragraphs ago, murder. Do you really think the people who are consciously launching a fake epidemic with all its consequences, including covering up and never remedying ongoing real causes of dying and death, would stop short of staging a few spectacular incidents of dying and death in order to make a splash and convince the public that the virus is really a killer? Are you kidding? For example, suddenly, out of the blue, a few friends, previously healthy in a small town, fall ill, and a few days later, they're dead. Health officials state they were, quote, positive for the virus, unquote. Quote, it came on quickly, unquote. Are tests run to detect an intentional covert act of direct poisoning? Of course not. Media blare this horrible story all over the world. Quote, unquote, the virus is on the move. Same thing happens to a previously healthy family in country X. They fall ill and die. And then a group of travelers on a mountain in country Y become ill and die. Murdered. However, the cover story is, quote, the virus knows no bounds. It can come on anywhere at any time, unquote. These events of death can only be explained by the virus. That's right, when the audience is brainwashed and completely naive. Have you thought about that? Some of these people dying or dropping dead, the video of them dropping dead in the streets of Wuhan, was that why they were dropping dead? Maybe there's something else. But how could anyone actually commit premeditated murder of innocent people in order to convince the public that a virus is spreading in unlikely places? As I mentioned, such controllers of the power that shouldn't be, as I like to say, I can't get that to catch on. I even hear radio hosts and people who traffic in, this kind of subject matter. I can't get them to say powers that shouldn't be. They still say powers that be. Nobody listens to me. It's all right. As I mentioned, such controllers are already guilty of murder because they're hiding the actual ongoing causes of death with the cover story of a virus. This sort of cover-up of crime has been happening around the world for a long, long time. To cite just two instances, look at parts of Africa and Haiti, where that, quote, HIV story, unquote, has been promoted and funded wall to wall in order to conceal intentionally created and sustained poverty, stolen farmland, and corporate takeovers involving massive poisonous industrial pollution. I'm thinking of India and some other things. All right. When you go back in history, as I have, you'll realize that fake epidemics are standard operating procedure. SARS, swine flu, West Nile, Zika, etc. I've written about every one of these phonies in detail. All right, so that's the end of this article. Here it is right here. It's called Power Outside the Matrix. You can find it at blog.nomorefakenews.com. I do think it's possible just like I know myself, way before Trump was president, I said most of the news is fake. Particularly, I'll never forget a particular post I made in social media about that plane from Asia that landed without landing gear in San Francisco, I think it was, or some California airport, with no landing gear, and the only person who died was a girl who was run over by a fire truck in the foam. Do you remember this? Well, if you looked at the plane on the trailer when they're taking it off, the undercarriage of the plane, the fuselage, had no scrape marks. I remember specifically posting that photo and saying, most of the news is fake. Why is that important? I don't know. It's just curious to me. But I don't think this came from the Trumptillion. A friend of mine called it the Trumptillion the other day. I thought that was pretty interesting. All right, so there you go. Remember, the devil said unto Jesus, all this power will I give you if you'll worship me. And the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And his followers have no compunction. How better to worship him than to do his will? Kill, steal, and destroy. And all the kingdoms and glory thereof, meaning the wealth, the pleasures, the beauty, all the lusts of the flesh that, heart can wish, will be given to them. Does it make sense? It's really simple. They may not even really believe. Now, a lot of them at the highest ups, they really do. They're pretty religious. Luciferians. Okay? So let's move on to Psalm 91, to what really is real. Okay? And this is the best part of the trip. This is the trip, the best part. Okay? I'm going to kind of recap a bit. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I got to change it. This is kind of getting old. Let's move on to a little bit better scene here. There we go. That's pretty. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Again, not Clorox bleach wipes, not clean surfaces and social distancing. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. From the COVID-19. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Now, I'm reading from the King James. I'm not cleaning it up for you. Grow up, okay? I'm sorry to be so blunt, but for years, I would reinterpret it just to make it more palatable for people. I get it. When I was younger, it sounded stuffy. But, ain't nobody got time for that now, okay? Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways, to bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Now this actually goes directly back to that passage in Luke 4 that I read, because he went on after showing him the kingdoms and the glory of all the power, the glory of the kingdoms of this world, and offering it to Christ if he would just worship Lucifer. After that, he took him to a high pinnacle, and he said, cast yourself down, and he tempted him to prove God would save him, right? And then Jesus said, you shall not tempt the Lord thy God. Okay, moving on. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder, and the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because he has set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. Do you set your love upon the Lord? Do you set him on high because you know his name? May we all do so. Can I say that fully, wholly? Probably not. The heart is willing, the flesh is weak, right? I want to set my love upon the Lord, but that's one reason too. Doing this video, this helps me, right? If I wasn't doing this, would I sit down and spend this much time in it this morning? Maybe not. I might get caught up watching YouTube videos or something, all right? He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. Now think about the omnipotent, most high God, the maker of heaven and earth, who watches you in your trouble, who gives you trials to purify you, he'll deliver you and honor you. That's a beautiful promise, right? With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. That's awesome. All right, let's get into it. So yesterday I stopped at verse 8. Let me see. Try to do maybe 2 from the treasury of David. Okay. We're going to do verses 9 and 10. I'm just going to read from there. And verses 9 and 10 are, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. No COVID-19 will come near your house. Before expounding these verses, I cannot refrain from recording a personal incident illustrating their power to soothe the heart when they are applied by the Holy Spirit. In the year 1854, when I had scarcely been in London 12 months. Oh, this is great. See, I haven't gotten around in the last 2 or 3 days to looking up. I thought about it. I talked about it in the videos. Looking up the fact that Charles Spurgeon lived around the time there was like a plague and people dying left and right. Bring out your dead. You know? And been at the deathbed and bedside of many, many parishioners, as you might call them. I don't know, people in his flock. Anyway, moving on. In the year 1854, when I had scarcely been in London 12 months, the neighborhood in which I labored was visited by Asiatic cholera, and my congregation suffered from its inroads. Family after family summoned me to the bedside of the smitten, and almost every day I was called to visit the grave. Can you imagine this? Does your pastor have this kind of a burden? Does this ever happen? Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe this pandemic, there's something to it. No doubt there'll be a lot of people who psychosomatically are going to be getting ill. That's true. Okay. All right. I gave myself up with youthful ardor to the visitation of the sick, and was sent for. All right, let me start over. I gave myself up with youthful ardor to the visitation of the sick, and was sent for from all corners of the district by persons of all ranks and religions. I became weary in body and sick at heart. My friends seemed falling one by one, and I felt or fancied that I was sickening like those around me. A little more work and weeping would have laid me low among the rest. I felt that my burden was heavier than I could bear, and I was ready to sink under it. As God would have it, I was returning mournfully home from a funeral, when my curiosity led me to read a paper which was wafered up in a shoemaker's window on the Dover Road. It did not look like a trade announcement, nor was it, for it bore in good, bold handwriting these words, quote, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling, unquote. The effect upon my heart was immediate. Faith appropriated the passage as her own. I felt secure, refreshed, girt with immortality. I went on with my visitation of the dying in a calm and peaceful spirit. I felt no fear of evil, and I suffered no harm. The providence which moved the tradesman to place those verses in his window I gratefully acknowledge, and in the remembrance of his marvelous power, I adore the Lord my God. The psalmist in these verses assures the man who dwells in God that he shall be secure. Though faith claims no merit of its own, yet the Lord rewards it wherever he sees it. He who makes God his refuge shall find him a refuge. He who dwells in God shall find his dwelling protected. Let me read that a different way. He who dwells in God shall find his dwelling protected. We must make the Lord our habitation by choosing him for our trust and rest. And then we shall receive immunity from harm. No evil shall touch us personally, and no stroke of judgment shall assail our household. The dwelling here, intended by the original, was only a tent. Yet the frail covering would prove to be a sufficient shelter from harm of all sorts. It matters little whether our abode be a gypsy's hut or a monarch's palace, if the soul has made the Most High its habitation. Get into God, and you dwell in all good, and ill is banished far away. It is not because we are perfect or highly esteemed among men that we can hope for shelter in the day of evil, but because our refuge is the eternal God, and our faith has learned to hide beneath his sheltering wing. And there's a verse here. Or there is a verse here, not a verse. For this no ill thy cause shall daunt, no scourge thy tabernacle haunt. That's probably from some old-timey hymn. It is impossible that any ill should happen to the man who is beloved of the Lord. The most crushing calamities can only shorten his journey and hasten him to his reward. Ill to him is no ill, but only good in a mysterious form. Let me read that again. Ill to him is no ill, but only good in a mysterious form. Losses enrich him. Sickness is his medicine. Reproach is his honor. Death is his gain. Isn't that deep? I mean, man, What happened to you that you think, oh, God's punishing me, or, oh, life sucks, or whatever, The right perspective, losses enrich us, sickness is our medicine, reproach is to our honor, death is his gain. They killed the prophets, right? No evil in the strict sense of the word can happen to him or her, right? For everything is overruled for good. Happy is he who is in such a case. He is secure where others are in peril. He lives where others die. How about that, right? Isn't that beautiful? I hope you find that beautiful. I know I do. And I want to play a song going out. I'm not sure how far I'll get with it. Okay. Hopefully this will come through. It's called My Sisters and My Brothers. Now I'm going to stop the video of the nature stuff because of bandwidth and whatnot. It might be a problem if I don't. So I'm going to stop that. Hope you enjoy the song. Make a great day. May God bless you. May you bless God, the Lord.
Bye. darkness, no form of destruction that waiteth in the noonday hour. If we walk together, little children, we don't ever have to worry through this world of trouble. We gotta love one another. Let us take our fellow man by the hand, try to help him to understand. We can all be together forever and ever when we make it to the promised land. This world is not our home. We're only passing through. Our train is all made up way beyond the blue. Let us do the very best that we can while we're traveling through this land. We've all shaking her hand when we make it to the promised land. If we walk together, little children, we won't ever have to worry through this world of trouble. We gotta love one another. Let us take our fellow man by the hand, try to help him to understand. We can all be together forever and ever when we make it to the promised land. When we make it to the promised land, 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 make it to the promised land. We can all be together forever and ever when we make it to the promised land. If we walk together, little children, we don't ever have to worry through this world of trouble. We gotta love one another. Let us take our fellow man by the hand, try to help him to understand.